as you know, Heartsutra mantra in your book. We'll say that mantra together for several times. And we'll say this mantra together for two reasons. The first reason is simply, once again, to bring back our minds to right here and now, and again to raise the awareness by using the sound of the mantra as an object to focus. Then the second reason, we'll say the mantra together to invoke blessings and inspiration from the Buddha and from those great teachers to give us blessings and inspirations to understand this important topic, subject, emptiness, shunyata, as it is taught by the Buddha such as in this Heartsutra. So to have the clear and unmistaken understanding on this subject, shunyata, to invoke blessings and inspirations from the Buddha and those great teachers. So for those two purposes, we'll say the mantra together.
God.
when you read such as this kind of sutra, Heartsutra, it is very, very useful to read the Heartsutra, in the atmosphere, in the feeling of that the historical Buddha, Gautama, is present in front of you. And read the sutra in a manner of that he is teaching you that sutra. And while you are reading, have this kind of feeling that really, although you yourself, you are reading by yourself, but have a feeling, create an atmosphere that Buddha is present and he is, giving you or teaching you this important sutra. And from time to time, when you, for example, when you reach saying the mantra, say mantra several times, and in a feeling of that you are receiving the blessings and inspirations, you to understand the emptiness, the shunyata, this important subject, important reality to be understood as it is, as Buddha taught, as it is, so you are receiving blessings and inspirations. So if you do that, it is very, very useful for you, gaining or having cultivating that understanding, the wisdom. Cultivating the understanding wisdom, such as this kind of very profound wisdom, is not only constantly analyzing, constantly thinking, constantly, rationalizing. Not only that, they are also very, very useful, thinking, analyzing, rationalizing, they are useful to understand such as this kind of topic, but it is not only through that sort of way. It is the combination of listening, learning from others, then using your own wisdom, your own the intelligence, thinking mind. On top of that, invoking blessings and inspiration from the Buddha and those great teachers. So if you do with the combination of these three together, then you will, not just you, myself too, we will start to see, start to understand this kind of topic. So it is very useful. Okay. Now, first I want to talk to you and the title of this category. The first category is called aggregate. In English it is translated as an aggregate. In Sanskrit it is called skandha, or in Pali it may have slightly different the pronunciation, but they're actually almost same. In Sanskrit it is called skandha, and in Tibetan it is called pungpo, P-H-U-N-G-P-O, pungpo in Tibetan. Not important. I'm just showing off my language. Anyway, this term is very, very crucial to understand emptiness. The term skandha, or sometimes in English translated saying heap, E-A-P, heap, group, but commonly translated saying aggregates. Aggregate. Now, when we say heap or aggregate, what that tells us, that tells us there are so many things in there, isn't it? There are so many things in there. When you say heaps of grain, when we say that, heaps of grain, then that means in that what we see in front of us, there are so many individual grains. And that is what is mean, heaps of grain. Or if we say heaps of rubbish, if you go to India, you will see along the roadside heaps of rubbish. So what you can see there are so many different rubbish piles. So when we say aggregate, when we say 5 aggregates, there are 5 different, heap of things. When we say 5 aggregates. And that's very important. The term itself is very important. When we say aggregate or skandha in Sanskrit, it tells us there are many individuals, not one united unit. You can buy, when you go to, what you call the IKEA, we can buy units of kitchen units or, in a, what you call the flat, pack. In that unit, we can see so many different pieces. So that what is helpful in here, the term itself, when we say aggregate, it tells us there are so many individuals, not some kind of unit, united things. They are individuals. What's the point of that? You need to think. As I said in the my last visit, as I said, when we discuss this kind of topic, you have to think where we are going. What's the point? What's the point? To use this term aggregate. What's the point? Why is it so important to say, there's a collection, there's a heap, not some kind of one unit. What is the point? You need to think. Any guess? Now, the point is this. In our usual thinking, in our day-to-day thinking, emotionally and sometimes intellectually, thinking, believing, assuming, believing, in here. In this mind and body, combination of mind and body, there is some kind of, the united thing called I. We believe in it. Just think, just think. I might be wrong. You may not believe that. That kind of unity, I, self, me. Or I want to take you the first step. Follow me. I want to take you the first step. Body. When you think my body is healthy. My body is not healthy. The body. Don't we have some sort of feeling or that kind of, the belief, assumption, some kind of unity, body, which is not well? Or you see the individual. I want you to think. Don't have? If you don't have that kind of belief, assumption, my body is healthy, that kind of unity body, which is healthy, or that kind of unity body, which is unhealthy. If you don't have that, you are really good in a right track. But if you have, and that is the point we need to look at. I want you to think two things again on top of this. These 2 points which I'm going to make now is very, very important. We can take it all the way. Start now, we can take it all the way. 2 points are this, which is quite common in the Western philosophy. Even in the very, very earlier, in some kind of, even the Buddhist time, maybe even before Buddhist time in the West, like some of the term they use, Socrates, before him. In the philosophy, there are 2 things. That when we talk about the things and events, how they come into being, how they come into being, and what they are. Are you following with me? How they come into being and what they are. 2 layers, which is also mentioned or have a view in the Western philosophy. And that view is very, very important in here. When you talk about emptiness, we need to understand that. How things and events come into being means come into existence, and what they are. These 2 are quite different. Are you following with me? These 2 are quite different. How things and events, they come into existence and what they are. These 2 are different. So this is a very important point. These 2 points are very important. You to not to mix. If you mix these 2, then we are in a big trouble. If you start in your mind, if you mix these 2, how things and events come into being, come into existence, and what they are, if we mix these 2 together, then there's a big trouble. In here, emptiness, when we talk about emptiness, we are not really very much talking about how they come into being. Not very much talking about how they come into being, we are talking about what they are. Okay, this is something you need to think, you need to look at. In Buddhist term, how they come into being is explained through the dependent origination. What they are is explained through the emptiness. I'll repeat again. In Buddhism, how the things and events come into being, answer is, in a very short answer, is because they come into being through the dependent origination. We can talk lots on that subject, but that's the short answer. Just bear in your mind, that's the short answer. They come into being through dependent origination. So, lots of blah blah on that. Okay, yeah, it's good. If you don't understand, then you ask. There is a nice story exactly on that. I will tell you that story. But some of you have heard this before. I told because I like that story very much because story is this. An American lady, old lady, I was told, went to Kopan in Nepal, one of the the monasteries in Nepal, and there he was relatively new in Buddhism, but he was there right in the middle of the Lama Rinpoche's teachings, and the Rinpoche was teaching dependent origination. The subject was raised, dependent origination. And he taught 7 days. When we say Lama Rinpoche taught 7 days, that means 7 days and 7 nights. So anyway, he taught that. And this lady, American lady, old lady, she participated in his teachings, dependent origination. And at the end of the 7 days teaching, she raised her hands, saying, I have a question. End of the 7 days. And she said, why you talk so much the Tibetan independent? why you talk so much Tibetan independent? But she keeps hearing, instead of dependent origination, she keeps hearing Tibetan independent. What's the relevant with the Tibetan independent with this Dhamma talk? So like that, it's very important. If you don't get it, what I'm saying is good to ask. Otherwise, you sacrifice this beautiful weekend in the sunny that weekend, and you end up sitting in a room and listening what he's saying. So it's important to ask if you don't get it the point. Anyway, so these two are different in the sense of how they come into being, what they are, different in the sense of how we approach to understand these two realities. And the Buddhist approach is how they come into being, the things and events, how they come into being. Of course, answer is through dependent origination. What they are answer is emptiness. So our topic here is what they are, not how they come into being. So don't think very much, they have causes, they have conditions. If you think that, and what is the origin? Is it a God? It is created somewhere? Then you are mixing two together. Although they have connection, but it is good to leave it sometimes different. So therefore, now, for us to understand, what they are, not what they come into being, and it is very, very useful to look at. In this case, anyway, I'm going too long again and again. In here is the first thing is the 5 aggregate here within us, around us, 5 aggregate, what they are. Now the term is the aggregate which we are looking at. Aggregate means here many different things come together, therefore the term is used, aggregate. And that term itself tells us, indicates us, there's nothing such as unity. The things are, sort of different things come together, like a collection, different things collected. And that term tells us like that, aggregate, 5 aggregate. The purpose of, if I go straight to the point, the purpose of looking at the 5 aggregates, one by one, which we will look at, 5 aggregates. The purpose of looking at the 5 aggregates is to dispel the wrong notion of self. I'll repeat it again. The reason of going through the 5 aggregates is wrong notion of self or I, or self or I. But within us, from the Buddhist understanding, within us there are many wrong notions of self or I. Some of wrong notion of self or I are very much, by the culture. Encountering particular culture, particular belief. As last night, some of you who are here, this gentleman asked the question, Buddhism doesn't believe soul, isn't it? Buddhism doesn't believe soul. He asked that question. So people who believe soul, due to encountering the Abrahamic religions, either Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, simply because encountering the culture or the religion or the belief or the philosophy, say whatever term you use. So within us we have so many different kinds of beliefs. What is I? What is self? What is me? Can you hear what I'm talking about? I'm not talking about how I'm coming to being, but we are talking about what I am. Different. What I am. And many of them are because of the encountering cultures, beliefs. Here we are not asking that. We are just, those are, I'm not touching. Here I'm talking about within us there are also many beliefs, many, assumptions, what is I, what I am, I or self or me, very naturally. Naturally. In other words, the term is used in Buddhism, innate. Can you hear me? Innate. I-N-N-A-T-E. Innate. Innate literally it means born with it. We are born with that belief. Not we pick it up later, when we've grown up, and later with encountering culture. Innate. Some of our sense of I, how we believe what we are, I, self, me, is innate. And this one, what we need, we have an innate belief. We have an innate belief or the assumption that I is some kind of unitary entity. Unitary entity. I. You understand? I is some kind of unitary entity. Nature, entity or nature, whatever term you use. Do you understand unitary? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That is important. That's very important. I is some kind of unitary nature, entity. I or the self or whatever term you use. Buddha going through, the reason why Buddha goes through the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness, going through the 5 aggregates again and again, sometimes, as I said earlier, very detailed, each aggregate going through very detailed to eliminate that wrong notion of self. Self or the I is some kind of unitary nature, entity which is in here. Now you have to really think whether you have that kind of notion of I or the self. I bet you have.
Yes.
That kind of notion of I or the self, has no cultural barrier, no language barrier, nothing. It is there, inborn. But the Buddha and the subsequently Buddhist teachers, that kind of belief that I is some kind of unitary nature in here is wrong. It's wrong by 2 reasons. First, it is wrong. There isn't an I in here, in that nature, in that manner, which we will look at later. In that sense, it is wrong. Secondly, it is wrong if we have that kind of belief of I or the self. That belief, that notion will trigger attachment and aversion. Trigger? Do you understand? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Leads. That leads, that brings. If you have a notion of I, something which is unitary nature in here, then whatever start to happen to that unitary nature of I, if it start to hurt, we feel hatred. If it start to make it happy, we start to feel closeness, attachment. In other words, there is like a natural forces. In the natural forces, there are 2 things: either draw back or push away. It is similar to that. When we have this notion of I or the self as some kind of unitary entity, nature in here, that attracts 2 things. Either things and events towards you, or certain things and events push away. And that's what I call attachment and aversion. Draw towards you is the attachment, push away from you is the aversion. And that is why it is wrong. Why that kind of notion is wrong for those two reasons. First of all, it is wrong. I or the self is not in that entity, not in that nature, in here. Nature of unity, unitary. Secondly, it is wrong because it attracts, it sort of leads us either experience attachment or aversion. So that is important. Now, you got it, the reason why Buddha said the 5 aggregates. He taught 5 aggregates for that purpose, to reduce that, to eliminate that. Now think how that looking at the 5 aggregates will eliminate, at least will reduce that kind of notion of self as a unitary entity. Now first we are going to look at the first aggregate, which is form aggregate, isn't it? Form. If you look at your Heartsutra, it says in Heartsutra, it says there's no form. So we are going to look at the form. When we say form aggregate, in Tibetan it is called sok. And in Sanskrit it is called rupa in Sanskrit, and in Tibetan it's called sok. And form aggregate. Now the form we have got here, this body. Now this body, I said this body, but that is, when I say this body, that is the term, that is the label, isn't it? Body. Body is the label, the term. Do you agree or disagree? Mm-hmm. I need some disagreement. we can have a good argument. So, when we say this body, this form aggregate, form of the body is the label, the term, given on this solid object. Now the form in the Buddhist literature has 2 types of form. This you want to know when we say form. 2 types of form. Normally when we say form, in English I think, form refers to a particular form, that is shapes and colors. Form. Shapes and colors. But for the Buddhism, the shapes and colors is what we call in Jungyuru. In Tibetan it's called Jungyuru. In English they translate it, which has a very difficult pronunciation for me. Where's that one? Yeah. Listen, this is my English pronunciation, you will learn. Derivative form. Derivative, D-E-R-I-V-A-T-I-V-E. Derivative form. Derivative means comes from somewhere. Form which comes from somewhere. Jongyuru. Can you say to everybody?
Abgeleitet.
Okay. Got it? It's important. Because here what we are doing is we are breaking things into small pieces. So normally we call form aggregates. Just got that, lump. Now what we are doing here is we are breaking this into small pieces. Then through these small pieces we are looking at, is there any something called I, unitary entity? That's what we're doing. First we are looking at the form, then come the other remaining four aggregates. And that is what we are doing here. Now, first you have to get the form. Normally we use in English the term form, what we say, shape and colors. But that is not the real, what we talking about here, form aggregate. That shape and color is the particular form. So, and now this form, the form aggregate, form body, form aggregate has two terms. Jungwa in Tibetan, Jungwa, that means element, or not say, great element, Jungwa, and Jungjuru, what's called derivative form. Jungwa, great element. We are looking at the form into two levels, in others two categories. Form, first one is called, the elements, four great elements. Four great elements. Then, from the four great elements come into being is the derivative forms. Okay? Now, what are the four great elements? Again, in here, I want to, some of you may familiar with the Western philosophy, and particularly the earlier philosophy, there are some similarities. But here, in Buddhism, the term is used, great elements. Different from using the elements. Here the term is used, great elements, Jungwa Chibu Shi in Tibetan. Now the four great elements are the same, what we normally use, the elements, and there are my notes are not very neatly put it and not very ordered. Whatever comes up in my head, I put it. Oh. Okay. Now, the four great elements are this: earth, water, fire, and wind. Now, don't get mistaken. The term is used earth, but don't think earth as the solid earth. Don't think, term is used fire, but don't think this burning fire. And also same as the water, don't think as like that. The term is used, the earth, water, wind, and fire, but they are not the normally worldly what we use, the term we use to something earth, called something's earth, something's fire, something's water, not that. in Buddhist literatures, it is said, ordinary people, there are two types of elements, two types of four elements. One is what known by the ordinary people, and that is what we normally call water in our bathroom, and fire in our kitchen, whatever. That is the ordinary people usage of four elements, and it says the second four elements are those people, the thinkers, they use as a four elements. And that's here we are using. We are not using, although the term is used, fire, water, wind, and the earth, but it is not the ordinary usage, it is the thinkers usage. Thinkers. In other words, those philosophers. So that's a different, yeah. Now, what is that great, four great element? The first one, the earth. The earth is that heartness entity. Heartness entity is the earth and great element. Heartness entities. Heartness entity is the great element of earth. Heartness entity. And what you call the fluidity, some kind of fluidity, movement, what you call the fluidity, some kind of, that is the water, great water element. Not as a water, like what in English you have, in your science you have the, 02? Is 02 or H? Yeah, so not in that way. Yeah, what's it? HO2, isn't it?
Yeah.
HO2, yeah. I missed the H anyway. Yeah. So not in that way. That is the grosser than the here that we talk about great element of water. The scientist term of HO2 is the, in other words, it is the secondary, the more grosser form, fluidity. And third great element of what you call the great element of fire is what you call ripening. For example, when you have a fruit, apple initially it's not ripened, then sun comes and slowly it's ripening.
Ripening.
Yeah, ripening. Ready to eat. Yeah, it is the great element of fire. Things changing from one to another, it is the entity of fire. That is the entity of fire, ripening. Then, and the last one, wind is movement. One, step to next one stage to another stage, movement. That is the great element of wind. These four great elements come together, then, according to the Buddhist literature, it will form the first, what you call the smallest atom. The smallest atom is when these four great elements come together. That is the smallest atom, according to Buddhism. Okay? The modern science may see this as very gross. I agree with them. Because Buddhist teachers use, or not just Buddhists, also Indian, those and non-Buddhists, they use only thinking, not very much microscope thinking. And so it might be very gross. But still, it has a tremendous power, mentally tremendous power to think how this, this body is coming to being. So when these four great elements come together, then shapes, colors, smell, taste, tactile, they all come to being. And these all are called Jungyuru, that means derivative form. Shapes and colors, smell, taste, sound, tactile, they all are derivative form. Now, if you look at it here as a body, what we have? We have those things. As a body, these things are there. Not more, not less. If there's more than that, we must find out. More than these, the four great elements and the five, the five, those, the sense objects. As a body in here, more than that, then we must find out when we look at. But there isn't. As a body, that's it. Based on these, based on four great elements and those, the five derivative form, what we did, we call body. We label, saying body. Not more, not less. That we need to get very precise. If you think, there might be more than that as my body, then you are you are not in a position. You are not in a position to say body is labeled on these things. Do you understand what are you following? What I'm saying is this. Here we are looking at the body aggregates. Out of five aggregates, we are looking at the body aggregate, form aggregate. And what is here as a form? What is here as a form? Here as a form, these result of, or came from these four great elements. From the four great elements, these five derivative forms, shapes, colors, smell, sound, tactile, and so on and so forth, these things. That's what here is a form. And what happened there, they are there, and the term, the label form is given on that. I think our head might be too big now. No. I want you to. But bad is in your mind. Bad in your mind. This one is very, very crucial. Not to get lost at this point.
I have one question to the personal self, the unifying function, which triggers this aversion and attachment, the two, aversion and attachment. Isn't it possible that there's a neutral state between aversion and attachment? A third one?
Okay.
In my life, I can find aversion and attachment, but I can also find neutral.
I usually don't call that as neutral. Usually that is called ignorance. Sorry. Quite often we think that is neutral, but it is not really necessarily neutral. Mainly, it is more just not knowing.
You mean it's a superficial, and beneath there is always aversion attachment?
No, not only always aversion attachment, but you're right. There will be a third category, as you said. I didn't say that. No, the third category. But what you said, when you are right, when I feel I or the self, sometimes I have a neutral feeling. That's what you said.
Yeah.
That neutral feeling, not necessarily real neutral. It can be ignorant. That's what I'm saying.
Ignorant about what?
Okay, that is a good question. Ignorance, relation to your not knowing your I as it is. Therefore, you have this neutral. What neutral in the sense of numb feeling.
Numb is what is numb?
Dumpf.
Dumpf?
When you go to dentist,
Yeah.
they give you something,
Yeah.
and they take off all your tooth.
Yeah.
Still, you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
That's the numb.
No. How?
Yeah. So, when you say neutral, relation to, although you have this feeling or this belief that self is unitary entity, and with that feel, with that belief that self is unitary nature entity, but with that belief, if you have a neutral, you say neutral feeling, that's not necessarily neutral. That is numb, or I usually call ignorance.
And you think it's numb and ignorant about the fundamental trends of aversion attachment?
That is.
You mean if I look closer to this neutral, then I will always find this aversion attachment?
Definitely.
Aha.
Definitely you'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now I understand your approach. Yeah.
I'm too ruthless today. Okay, we'll stop here. But I want you to think this form aggregate while you are eating, while you're chewing your lunch. I want you to think this form, so-called form aggregate. It is the result of, or it is something. Many different combinations, many different particles, things put together, then I call it form. Not more, not less.
Can these four factors be called the whole material world?
Yes, exactly. That's what we're talking about form.
Yep.
Yeah. These great four elements are, according to the Buddhist philosophy, these four great elements are the origin or the starter of the matter world, material world. Okay, we should have lunch. Otherwise you will not come back.